Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. We're here for our week in review, and boy, we have a lot of news. On the domestic front, Chris Christie dropped out of the presidential race, leaving only two candidates who promptly spent the debate, as the only two people on the stage, attacking one another. And that was Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. And they were supposed to be competing against Donald Trump, but unfortunately, they've chosen not to. And that's because they're scared of the base. That's because they think the base won't like them if they attack Donald Trump. And they might be right, actually. But that leaves Donald Trump with very little competition. The Iowa caucuses will take place on Monday, even though there is a snowstorm, and that I would think would further benefit Trump because his people will not only climb through snow, but probably cut glass to go out to vote for him. So we're going to have the first actual votes of the 2024 Republican primary season, but I don't know that we're going to have a contest, and we'll see. I think Nikki Haley will probably come in second. And then the question is whether Ron DeSantis finally spares himself and us any further campaigning, and then whether she can possibly beat him anywhere. And that's going to be tough because the Republican Party, as Liz Cheney said this week, is gone. They're now a cult of personality. And if you're looking for conservative ideas, or you're looking for patriots, or you're looking for people who believe in the rule of law, you're going to have to go elsewhere because the Republican Party is now reduced to essentially a fascist cult. So that was not very good news, was it? Meanwhile, international news really took center stage this week. As we have been patrolling the Red Sea and the area of the Gulf to stop the Hamas-Israel war, there have been ongoing attacks for weeks now from the Houthis, who are another surrogate terror group, essentially, of Iran. And they have been taking pot shots at international shipping. They've been taking pot shots at American ships. And frankly, the president has not had a very powerful response until this week. And what was announced last night was that the Biden administration had gotten together with some allies, most clearly with Britain, but with support from countries like Bahrain and Australia, and they unleashed a massive attack on Houthi military installations in Yemen. Now, whether this will degrade the Houthi military to such an extent that these things will stop is probably too much to hope for. They will be resupplied by their patrons in Tehran. They will be further helped with all sorts of logistical help, all sorts of intelligence assistance, because Iran is using them just as it uses Hezbollah in Lebanon, just as it uses Hamas in Gaza, to instill what they call a ring of fire around Israel, to try to conflate the entire region into one big battle between Iran and the Sunnis, represented by countries like Saudi Arabia, and the great Satan, the United States. The little Satan, who they refer to as Israel, is desperately trying to stop this from becoming a multi-front war, which would be very bad indeed. And the president has issued all sorts of warnings, mainly aimed, I think, at Hezbollah, that we should not expand this war, that the war needs to be contained, and that it's in no one's interest to expand this. But along come the Houthis with impetus from Iran, and lo and behold, we are, I think, at the precipice of a much bigger, much scarier regional war. What is Iran doing? It is baiting the United States. It is attacking the United States, just as Hezbollah has been baiting the Israelis to assume another front in the war, this time in the north. Iran would like nothing better than to engage in endless battles with the United States, with the Israelis, to unleash their surrogates throughout the region, This is what the regime does, and it does constantly push and push and push until it meets resistance. So eventually, what does the United States do? Do we attack installations in Iran? That would certainly be a big step. Now, I will say, Israel has had no problems attacking installations in Iran. It has done so militarily, it's done with cyber warfare, it's done with sabotage, and for years now, really decades, they have been playing cat and mouse with the Iranians. But the United States engaging directly with Iran in any kind of military conflict has not yet happened. And that should give us all pause. That could escalate very quickly. You could imagine both China and Iran and Russia all piling in, and then we have really World War III, not in Ukraine, but in the Middle East. And this is the real danger. So what does the president do? I think he has to continue to weigh in very strongly militarily against the Houthis. And I think they are going to have to continue to push and use the Arab states that Israel has good relations with, like Bahrain, like Morocco, like Saudi Arabia, like the UAE, to really push to wrap up the Gaza war. Israel has accomplished virtually all it needs to do militarily in the north. So it is going through the south now in a much more confined area with much more targeted fighting to try to remove the remnants of Hamas's leadership, the last of the tunnels, the last of the military installations. But if this goes on much longer, we are going to come closer to that regional conflagration. And I think you're going to see, we've already seen some of it, but you're going to see more intense pressure to narrow the fighting and to wrap things up. And Israel, of course, faces all sorts of domestic issues. And this coalition government has been blamed, absolutely rightly so, by the population for the October 7 attack, leaving them unprotected, for failing to come to the aid of civilians in a timely manner, for failing to attend to the enormous social and economic disruption that the Israelis have experienced in the wake of October 7. And, of course, they were angry with the regime before this. They were angry with the coalition government well before this, in part because they went after the independence of the judiciary, in part because they brought in extremely right-wing, extremely racist ministers that pop off about the Palestinians, that talk in really reprehensible terms. And so the country has a decision to make, and it will make that decision, I think, sooner rather than later, probably not during the pendency of the war, because you could understand their fear of disruption. But I think very soon after, you're going to see a change in government. What comes next? That's the big question. We don't know. We don't know whether the protesters who were in the streets for 30-odd weeks will form a political party or a political movement. And we don't know what that government's attitude is going to be towards the Palestinians. Frankly, the peace movement has been dead in Israel, right, left, and center for years now. There's not been any strong political push to make a deal with the Palestinians. But perhaps the October 7 war has scrambled the alliances, has shaken the population, and perhaps there is some recognition that they have to resolve this issue. Otherwise, they set themselves up for one October 7 after another, for forever. And I think that realization will take a while to settle in. Right now, the country is traumatized and still reeling from October 7 and from the very considerable losses they are suffering in the conduct of the war. They have lost a large number of Israeli military as they go through the Gaza Strip. So we have a fraught situation, to put it mildly, on the Middle East front. And of course, meanwhile, Ukraine is doing without, because our U.S. Congress, and specifically the Republicans in the House, cannot get their act together to pass first a budget and secondly a supplemental bill that would aid Ukraine. And this is a very scary prospect. If we cut off Ukraine and they are really deprived of what they need, they will lose the potential to win this war. They will lose, frankly, the opportunity even to have a stalemate. And we're talking about, after all of this time, 2 years, countless losses, billions of dollars in aid, billions of dollars in destruction, that Ukraine could lose because the Republicans in the U.S. House are not patriotic, are not supportive of democracy, are not concerned about being good allies. They are completely dysfunctional, inward-looking nuts. And we're going to pay the price, and the international community is going to pay the price. So I think this has not been a good week for peace around the globe. Fortunately, at home, the economy continues to be strong. President Biden continues to make more nominations for the bench, for the federal bench. And Donald Trump, we will close with him. Donald Trump, what's happening to him? Well, first of all, he got whacked by the D.C. Circuit, which was hearing an appeal on his immunity claim. Remember, he thinks he can do anything as president. This panel was not about to put up with that. And I think everyone is waiting for the opinion that will smack him down very hard. Donald Trump thinks he's a dictator. He's playing the role of dictator. He's running to be a dictator. And the D.C. Circuit is going to inform him that in America we don't have dictators. And that may be a rude awakening for him, but it's coming. And meanwhile, in his civil case, he can't play by the rules there either. He was told he wouldn't be able to speak because he couldn't stick to the rules in the closing statement. He spoke anyway. The judge very gruffly told his counsel, control your client. Never a good phrase to hear from the judge, who, by the way, is the fact finder in this case. And so that concluded with a usual bizarre harangue, not on the merits, making accusations, not making sound legal arguments. It was just a food fight. And some observers have wondered whether he's even trying to win these cases. Remember, this is all for public consumption. This is all about him winning the election so he can become that dictatorial figure and then wipe out judgments, seek revenge on prosecutors, whether they be state or federal, and he thinks maintain his get-out-of-jail-free card. So I think it's coming close to the time where Donald Trump's conception of the legal system is going to run right smack into reality. And I think he's going to get nowhere with the immunity defense. And I think with perhaps some moderate delay, he will go to trial in the Jack Smith case, and he will go to trial in New York on the falsification of business records case. So there is a judgment day coming, not this week, not this month, but soon. And we will see. I have a feeling that the Republican Party is going to nominate someone who is then convicted of a series of serious felonies. So that'll be an interesting development. If you like this program and you like our other programs at Jen Rubin's Green Room, please tell your friends. They can listen and follow at YouTube or at Apple Podcasts. Bye-bye. And don't forget, you can click here to subscribe.